The Aurora Dawn drifted silently through the cold void of space, its systems barely holding together. The crew worked around the clock, their movements mechanical and driven by necessity. Despite their efforts, an undercurrent of unease rippled through the ship. It wasn't just the dwindling supplies or the looming threat of the Zorathians, it was something deeper, harder to define. Suspicion had begun to creep into their thoughts, planting seeds of doubt that threatened to unravel what little unity they had left. Private Jake Harper was at the center of it all. His paranoia had grown worse with each passing day, feeding on the uncertainty of their situation. He paced the corridors late at night, muttering under his breath about betrayal and hidden enemies. To him, every shadow seemed suspicious. Every sound like a warning. When he wasn't working, he spent hours poring over old mission briefings, searching for clues or proof that someone aboard the ship couldn't be trusted. One evening, as the rest of the crew settled into their bunks or gathered in small groups for meals, Harper stormed into the main chamber. Captain Ethan Carter was there, reviewing data on a tablet with Lieutenant Laura Bennett. They looked up as Harper approached, his face flushed with anger. "I know who's behind this," Harper blurted out, pointing an accusatory finger at Medical Officer Ryan Scott. "It's him," Ethan frowned, setting the tablet aside. "What are you talking about, Harper?" "He's been acting strange ever since we woke up," Harper insisted, his voice rising. "He spends half his time alone in the infirmary, tinkering with equipment. No one else understands. And have you noticed how often he disappears during shifts, or how quiet he is when everyone else is talking?" Ryan stood nearby, his calm blue eyes widening in surprise. "I don't know what he's talking about," he said softly, his tone measured but firm. "I've done nothing wrong." Harper scoffed, stepping closer. "Oh, come on, you think anyone believes that?" He turned back to Ethan, jabbing a finger toward Ryan. "He's not even from Earth. He grew up on one of those colony worlds. Who's to say he isn't working for the Zorathians? Maybe they sent him here to sabotage us." The accusation hung heavy in the air, sparking murmurs among the few crew members who had gathered. Some exchanged uneasy glances, while others shook, their heads in disbelief. Ryan's background wasn't exactly a secret. He had joined the mission later than most, transferring from a medical outpost near the edge of human-controlled space. But accusing him of being a spy felt like a stretch, even for Harper. "That's enough," Ethan said sharply, stepping between Harper and Ryan. His voice carried authority, silencing the room. "We're all under pressure right now, but throwing baseless accusations around won't help anyone. If you have evidence, bring it forward, otherwise stand down." Harper glared at him, his fists clenched tightly. For a moment it looked like he might argue further, but instead, he let out a frustrated growl and stormed off, slamming the door behind him. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. He glanced at Ryan, who looked shaken but composed. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. Ryan nodded. "I'm fine, sir. I understand why people might be suspicious. It's natural given our situation. But I want you to know I'm not hiding anything." "I believe you," Ethan replied firmly. Still, the incident weighed heavily on his mind. Paranoia was dangerous, especially in such close quarters. If Harper's behavior continued unchecked, it could spiral out of control, fracturing the fragile trust holding the crew together. Later, that night, Ethan met with Sergeant Olivia Grant in the dimly lit corridor outside the main chamber. Her arms were crossed, her expression grim. "You heard about Harper's outburst?" she asked without preamble. Ethan nodded. "Yeah, he's getting worse. I don't know if it's stress or something else, but he's becoming a liability." Olivia frowned. "If we don't address this soon, it could turn into a bigger problem. People are already scared. Throwing accusations around only makes it worse." "I agree," Ethan said, "but confining him to quarters feels extreme. We need him sharp and focused, not stewing in his own anger." "Maybe," Olivia conceded, "but keep an eye on him. If he starts causing trouble again, we'll need to act fast." As the days passed, Harper's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He avoided interacting with the crew, retreating to isolated corners of the ship where he could watch others without being seen. His accusations against Ryan spread quietly among the group, sowing seeds of doubt. Even Laura noticed the change, though she tried to stay focused on her work. "It's starting to affect morale," she told Ethan one evening as they reviewed progress on decrypting Project Phoenix. "People are whispering behind each other's backs. No one trusts anyone anymore." Ethan rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of leadership pressing down on him. "We can't afford infighting right now, not with everything else going on." Laura hesitated before speaking. "Do you think Harper might actually be onto something? I mean, what if there is someone working against us?" Ethan shook his head. "I don't see any proof. Harper's just lashing out because he's scared, and so is everyone else. But unless we find concrete evidence, we can't act on suspicion alone." Despite his words, Ethan couldn't shake the nagging feeling that Laura might be right. Something about Harper's claims echoed in the back of his mind, refusing to fade. What if someone aboard the Aurora Dawn truly couldn't be trusted? Could the Zorathians have infiltrated them somehow? The tension reached a breaking point 2 days later. Harper confronted Ryan in the engineering bay, his voice loud enough to draw attention from nearby crew members. "Why won't you admit it?" Harper demanded, his face red with fury. "You're not one of us, you never were." Ryan backed away, raising his hands defensively. "I don't know what you want me to say," he replied calmly. "I'm here to help, same as everyone else." "You're lying," Harper shouted, grabbing Ryan by the collar. Before anyone could intervene, chaos erupted. Crew members rushed to separate the two men, shouting over one another as emotions boiled over. Olivia arrived moments later, her presence commanding immediate silence. She surveyed the scene with a steely gaze, then turned to Harper. "That's it," she said firmly. "You're confined to quarters until further notice. Understood?" Harper glared at her, breathing heavily, but didn't resist as she escorted him away. The room fell silent, the crew exchanging uneasy looks. Though the confrontation was over, the damage had been done. Trust, once fragile, now felt irreparably broken. Back in the main chamber, Ethan stared at the stars visible through a cracked viewport. His reflection in the glass showed lines of exhaustion etched deeply into his face. He thought about Harper's accusations, about the growing divide among the crew. Were they truly alone, or was there someone, or something else, aboard the ship watching them, waiting for the right moment to strike? Whatever the truth, one thing was certain. Humanity's survival depended not just on repairing the Aurora Dawn, but on healing the fractures within their ranks. If they couldn't find a way to trust each other again, their mission, and perhaps their species, would fail long before they faced the Zorathians. For now, all Ethan could do was hold them together, piece by piece, and hope it would be enough. The days that followed were a blur of activity aboard the Aurora Dawn. The crew worked tirelessly, driven by a mix of fear and determination. Captain Ethan Carter moved from one station to another, checking on progress and offering encouragement, where he could. Despite their efforts, the ship remained fragile, a patchwork of repairs holding together against the vast emptiness of space. Every creak of metal or flicker of light served as a reminder of how precarious their situation truly was. Lieutenant Laura Bennett spent most of her time hunched over her workstation, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she tried to crack the encryption on the mysterious logs labeled Project Phoenix. Her frustration grew with each passing hour, but she refused to give up. Something about those files felt important, like they held answers to questions no one had even thought to ask yet. Meanwhile, tensions among the crew began to rise. Supplies were running low, and the cramped quarters made it hard for people to escape the constant reminders of their dire circumstances. Private Jake Harper's skepticism had evolved into outright hostility, his sharp comments cutting through the already strained atmosphere. He wasn't alone in his doubts. Others whispered quietly about whether waking up had been worth it. What was the point of survival if there was no hope of rescue or victory? Ethan noticed the growing unease and called a meeting in the main chamber. He knew morale was slipping, and if they didn't address it soon, the cracks would widen until The entire mission collapsed. As the crew gathered, their faces reflected exhaustion and uncertainty. Some avoided eye contact while others stared at him expectantly, waiting for reassurance. "Listen up," Ethan began, his voice calm but firm. "I know things look bad right now. We're stranded, we don't know who to trust, and we're running out of resources. But let me remind you why we're here. Earth sent us because they believed in us, in our ability to adapt, to fight, and to survive. If we lose faith now, then everything we've done so far has been for nothing." His words hung in the air, heavy but necessary. A few heads nodded, though not everyone looked convinced. Harper leaned against a nearby console, arms crossed tightly, over his chest. "That's all well and good, Captain," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "But believing in ourselves won't fix the ship or bring back the Valens. It sure as hell won't stop the Zorathians from finding us if they decide to show up." Ethan clenched his jaw, resisting the urge to snap back. Instead, he turned to Laura. "What have you found in those logs?" he asked, hoping for some good news. Laura hesitated, unsure how much to share. She had managed to decrypt part of the file, revealing fragments of information that raised more questions than answers. "It's complicated," she admitted. "Project Phoenix seems to be some kind of contingency plan. There are references to advanced technology designed to rebuild alliances, or maybe even create new ones. But the details are still locked behind deeper layers of encryption." Ethan frowned. "Can you break it?" "I'm working on it," Laura replied, her voice tinged with frustration. "But it's going to take time. Whoever created this didn't want just anyone accessing it." Harper snorted. "Great. So we're betting our lives on something we can't even read." Before Ethan could respond, Sergeant Olivia Grant stepped forward. Her commanding presence silenced the room instantly. "Enough," she said sharply. "We don't have time for arguments or self-pity. Captain Carter is right. We're here because Earth trusted us to get the job done. And sitting around doubting ourselves isn't going to help anyone. Now, unless someone has a better idea, I suggest we focus on what we can control, fixing the ship, staying alive, and preparing for whatever comes next." Her words struck a chord, snapping the crew out of their funk. Slowly, people began nodding in agreement. Even Harper seemed to deflate slightly, his scowl softening into reluctant acceptance. With renewed resolve, the crew returned to their tasks. In the engineering bay, Laura continued her work on the encrypted logs, occasionally consulting with technician Daniel Parks, who had a knack for solving complex puzzles. Together, they pieced together bits of information, slowly unraveling the mystery of Project Phoenix. What they discovered was both fascinating and unsettling. The project appeared to involve a prototype device capable of amplifying human ingenuity, essentially boosting creativity and problem-solving abilities. According to the fragmented data, the device had been intended as a last resort, meant to inspire humanity's allies and forge new connections in times of crisis. However, the logs also hinted at risks, warnings about unintended consequences, and ethical dilemmas. Laura shared her findings with Ethan during a private meeting later that evening. They sat in the dimly lit corridor outside the main chamber, the hum of the ship's systems providing a steady backdrop to their conversation. "This changes things," Ethan said quietly, his brow furrowed in thought. "If we can activate this device, it might give us a fighting chance, not just against the Zorathians, but in rebuilding trust with whoever's left out there." "But it's risky," Laura cautioned. "We don't fully understand how it works or what it could do to us if something goes wrong." "I know," Ethan interrupted gently, "but we're running out of options. If this is our best shot, we need to take it." As they spoke, strange readings began appearing on the ship's sensors once again. This time the signals were stronger, almost pulsating in rhythm. It was as if whatever or whoever was out there was trying to communicate. Ethan ordered the crew to monitor the situation closely, fearing it might be a trap. Back in the main chamber, Medical Officer Ryan Scott tended to minor injuries sustained during repair efforts. His calm demeanor provided a sense of stability amidst the chaos. Nearby, communications specialist Mia Torres struggled to make sense of the incoming transmissions. Bursts of static filled the air, punctuated by faint whispers that sounded almost like voices. "It's like they're trying to say something," Mia muttered, adjusting the frequency dials. "But I can't quite catch it." Olivia stood nearby, her hand resting on her weapon. "Keep trying," she urged. "If we can figure out what they want, it might give us an edge." Hours passed as the crew worked together, piecing together clues and preparing for the unknown. Though fear lingered in the shadows, there was also a glimmer of hope, a belief that, despite everything, they might find a way to survive. For now, all they could do was wait and prepare. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together as humanity's last hope. The next morning, the crew of the Aurora Dawn gathered once more in the main chamber. The mood was tense but focused, each person aware of the monumental task ahead. Captain Ethan Carter stood at the center, his face lined with fatigue but his eyes sharp and determined. He had spent most of the night overseeing repairs and reviewing the limited data they had managed to recover. Now he needed answers, and fast. "All right, team," Ethan began, addressing the group. "We've made some progress stabilizing the ship, but we're still blind. We don't know where we are, what happened to the Valens, or why our systems failed. That changes today." Lieutenant Laura Bennett stepped forward, her tablet and she had been working tirelessly on decrypting the mysterious logs labeled Project Phoenix. Though she hadn't cracked the encryption yet, she had uncovered something else, a faint signal detected by the ship's sensors shortly before the alarms woke them. "I found traces of an external energy signature," Laura explained, her voice calm but urgent. "It's faint, almost like it's trying to hide, but it's there. It's coming from somewhere nearby, close enough for us to investigate." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "Could it be the Valens?" "It's possible," Laura replied, "but it could also be debris from their ships, or even something else entirely. Until we get closer, we won't know." Private Jake Harper crossed his arms, skepticism etched across his face. "You mean something like the Zarathians?" he asked, his tone laced with sarcasm. "Because that's just what we need right now, an enemy fleet waiting to blow us out of the sky." Ethan shot Harper a warning glance, but the private wasn't wrong. The Zarathians were ruthless, their empire built on conquest and destruction. If they had somehow tracked the Aurora Dawn, the crew would be in serious trouble. Still, speculation wouldn't help them move forward. "We can't jump to conclusions," Ethan said firmly, "but we do need to find out what's out there. Lieutenant Bennett, assemble a recon team. Take Sergeant Olivia Grant and 2 others. I want eyes on whatever this signal is as soon as possible." Laura nodded, already mentally selecting members for the mission. She glanced at Olivia, who gave a curt nod in return. The sergeant was always ready for action, her steady demeanor making her a natural choice for high-risk operations. Within an hour, the reconnaissance team was prepped and suited up in lightweight environmental gear. Their destination lay several thousand kilometers away, deep in the void of space. Using one of the ship's smaller scout pods, Laura piloted the craft with precision, flanked by Olivia and 2 other crew members, technician Daniel Parks and communications specialist Mia Torres. The journey was silent save for the hum of the engines and the occasional crackle of static over the comms. As they approached the source of the signal, the view outside the pod's windows grew increasingly ominous. Drifting through the darkness was a graveyard of ships, twisted metal husks floating aimlessly, their surfaces scarred by weapons fire and explosions. Some were recognizable as Valon vessels, their sleek designs marred by gaping holes and blackened hulls. Others were unidentifiable, reduced to little more than scraps of debris. "This doesn't look good," Mia murmured, her voice barely audible over the comms. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the scanners, trying to pinpoint the exact origin of the signal. Olivia scanned the wreckage with a practiced eye, her grip tightening on her weapon. "Stay alert," she warned. "If this was a battlefield, there might still be hostiles around." Laura guided the pod closer, weaving carefully between the shattered remains of the ships. The signal grew stronger as they moved deeper into the debris field, leading them to a massive structure partially hidden behind a cluster of destroyed vessels. It was unlike anything they had seen before, a jagged, irregular shape covered in strange markings that glowed faintly in the darkness. "What is that thing?" Daniel asked, his voice tinged with awe and unease. Before anyone could answer, movement caught their attention. Small insect-like drones emerged from the shadows, hovering silently around the pod. They were sleek and metallic, their movements fluid and deliberate. For a moment, the team sat frozen, unsure whether the drones posed a threat. Then, without warning, the drones began scanning the pod, their glowing lenses focusing intently on the humans inside. Laura instinctively reached for the controls, preparing to retreat if necessary, but the drones didn't attack. Instead, they lingered for a few seconds longer, before darting back into the darkness, disappearing as quickly as they had appeared. "Well, that was creepy," Mia muttered, letting out a shaky breath. Olivia frowned, her hand still resting on her weapon. They weren't hostile, at least not yet, but someone or something sent them. "We're being watched." Laura nodded grimly. "Let's gather what intel we can and get back to the ship. Whatever's out here, we don't want to stick around long enough to find out." The team took detailed scans of the structure and surrounding debris, noting its position and any distinguishing features. As they prepared to leave, Mia picked up another faint transmission, one that seemed to originate from within the structure itself. The message was garbled, distorted by interference, but snippets of it came through clearly enough to send chills down their spines. Betrayal, humanity, trust. The voice repeated, fragmented and haunting. Mia turned pale. "Did you hear that?" Everyone nodded, exchanging uneasy glances. The implications were clear. If the Valens believed humanity had betrayed them, their chances of finding allies were slim to none. Back aboard the Aurora Dawn, the recon team reported their findings to Ethan and the rest of the crew. The captain listened intently, his expression growing darker with each revelation. The discovery of the wreckage and the drones painted a troubling picture. The Valens had likely been attacked, possibly wiped out entirely. And if the garbled transmission was any indication, humanity might have been framed for their downfall. "This complicates things," Ethan admitted, pacing back and forth. "If the Valens think we betrayed them, we'll never gain their trust, even if survivors exist. And if the Zorathians are responsible, we're sitting ducks." Harper leaned against a nearby console, shaking his head. "So basically, we're screwed either way." Ethan shot him a sharp look. "Not necessarily. We still have options. Lieutenant Bennett, keep working on those encrypted logs. Maybe Project Phoenix holds some answers. In the meantime, we need to fortify the ship and prepare for the worst." Laura nodded, already heading back to her workstation. The encrypted files taunted her, their secrets locked behind layers of complex algorithms. But she refused to give up. Somewhere in those logs was the key to understanding what had gone wrong and how to fix it. As the crew dispersed to carry out their tasks, Ethan remained in the main chamber, staring at the stars through a viewport. The vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly before him, both beautiful and terrifying. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, not just by the drones, but by something far greater. Whether friend or foe, whoever or whatever it was, they would have to face it soon. For now, all Ethan could do was focus on keeping his crew alive and hopeful. They had survived cryosleep, system failures, and the eerie remnants of an ancient battle. Whatever came next, they would face it together as humanity's last hope. The lights flickered on one by one, casting a pale glow over the cold metallic walls of the cryogenic chamber. The hum of machinery filled the air, low and steady, like the heartbeat of some ancient beast waking from a long slumber. Rows upon rows of glass pods lined the room, each containing a human body suspended in time. For centuries, these people had been frozen, their lives paused as the ship carried them across the vast emptiness of space. In the center of the room, one pod began to hiss. A faint mist swirled around its edges as the seal broke, and the transparent lid slid open with a soft click. Inside lay Captain Ethan Carter, his face calm but weary, as if even in stasis, He bore the weight of responsibility. His eyes fluttered, open, adjusting slowly to the dim light. He blinked several times, disoriented, before sitting up and taking a deep breath. The air was crisp and sterile, carrying a faint metallic tang that reminded him where he was. Ethan swung his legs over the side of the pod, planting his feet firmly on the floor. It felt strange after so long. His muscles were stiff, unaccustomed to movement. He stretched carefully, testing his limbs, then stood up fully. Around him, other pods began to activate, releasing more members of the crew. They groaned and muttered, rubbing their eyes or stretching sore joints. Some looked around in confusion while others simply stared ahead, trying to piece together what was happening. One of the first voices Ethan heard belonged to Lieutenant Laura Bennett. She stepped out of her pod nearby, brushing strands of dark hair away from her face. Her sharp green eyes scanned the room quickly, already analyzing the situation. "Captain," she said, her tone calm but tinged with urgency. "Something's wrong." Ethan nodded. He didn't need to ask why she thought so. The alarms blaring through the ship made it obvious enough. Red warning lights flashed intermittently along the walls, bathing the room in an unsettling crimson glow. The usual comforting hum of the ship's systems was interrupted by irregular beeping and static bursts coming from the intercoms. No one spoke over the comm channels. There was only silence, broken occasionally by bursts of interference. "Everyone stay calm," Ethan called out, raising his voice just enough to be heard above the noise. "We'll figure this out." His words carried authority, but there was no mistaking the tension in his expression. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. According to the mission plan, they should have awakened gradually, greeted by automated updates about their progress and the status of their journey. Instead, they had been jolted awake without explanation, surrounded by chaos. Laura approached him, holding a tablet she'd retrieved from a nearby console. "I've pulled up the diagnostic reports," she said, her brow furrowing as she scrolled through the data. "It looks like we suffered some kind of system failure during transit. Power fluctuations, damage to critical systems. I'm not sure yet how bad it is, but it's serious." Ethan took the tablet from her hands, skimming the information. It confirmed his worst fears. Multiple hull breaches had been detected, though most had been sealed automatically. Life support systems were functioning at reduced capacity, and the navigation array was offline. But the most troubling detail came at the bottom of the report. A section labeled Crew Status showed far fewer active pods than expected. "How many of us are left?" Ethan asked quietly, dreading the answer. Laura hesitated for a moment before responding. 32, out of 247. The weight of those numbers hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. Over 200 souls. All gone. Whether due to malfunctions, unforeseen complications, or something else entirely, he couldn't say. What mattered now was ensuring the survival of those who remained. He handed the tablet back to Laura and turned to address the rest of the crew. "All right, listen up," he shouted, drawing everyone's attention. "We don't know exactly what's happened here, but we're going to find out. First priority is assessing the damage and securing our position. Lieutenant Bennett will lead a team to check the engineering bay and stabilize the power grid. Medical personnel, gather whatever supplies you can find and set up a triage area. We may have injuries to deal with. Everyone else pair off and start inspecting the ship. Report anything unusual immediately." The crew nodded, snapping into action despite their grogginess. Ethan watched them move, feeling both pride and unease. These were good people, skilled and dedicated, but they were also scared. And rightly so. Waking up in the middle of nowhere, light years from Earth, with half the ship malfunctioning and nearly all their comrades missing, it was enough to shake anyone's resolve. As the others dispersed, Ethan walked over to one of the main control panels and activated the ship's AI interface. "Ship, give me a status update," he commanded. The AI responded in a smooth, neutral voice. "Good morning, Captain Carter. Current date is October 14th, 2347. You have been in cryogenic stasis for approximately 375 years. Hull integrity is compromised in sections B7 and C3. Navigation systems are non-functional. Communication arrays are offline. Cryopod failure rate is estimated at 78%. Cause unknown. 375 years. The number echoed in Ethan's mind, staggering in its enormity. So much time had passed since they left Earth. He wondered what had become of their home planet in all those centuries. Had humanity thrived, or had it fallen apart under the pressures of war and despair? The thought sent a chill down his spine, but there was no time to dwell on such questions. Right now, survival was the only thing that mattered. With a heavy sigh, Ethan turned back toward the crowd of awakening crew members. Among them was Private Jake Harper, a young soldier with fiery red hair and a perpetually skeptical expression. Harper caught Ethan's eye and raised an eyebrow. "So, Captain," he said, his tone laced with sarcasm, "any idea where we are?" Ethan shook his head. "Not yet, but we'll find out soon enough." Harper snorted. "Great. Just great. Wake us up in the middle of nowhere. Throw us into God knows what kind of mess." He trailed off, muttering under his breath as he wandered away. Despite Harper's cynicism, Ethan knew the man had a point. They were stranded, vulnerable, and completely in the dark about their surroundings. The mission briefing had promised cooperation with the Valons, an advanced alien race allied with humanity against the Zorathian Empire. Together, they were supposed to turn the tide of a devastating interstellar conflict. But none of that seemed relevant anymore, not when their own ship was falling apart around them. Ethan glanced at Laura, who was busy coordinating teams and assigning tasks. She moved with purpose, her focus unwavering despite the dire circumstances. He admired her determination, even as doubts gnawed at the edges of his mind. Could they really pull through this? Were they truly humanity's last hope, as the mission title suggested? For now, all he could do was take it one step at a time. One problem solved, one crisis averted, until they found their footing again. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Ethan vowed to face them head-on, for the sake of the crew, for the sake of Earth, and for the future of humanity itself. The crew of the Aurora Dawn gathered in the main chamber, a large circular room with walls lined by blinking control panels and holographic displays. The atmosphere was tense, filled with a mix of confusion, fear, and determination. Captain. Ethan Carter stood at the center, his tall frame radiating calm authority despite the storm brewing inside him. Around him, 32 faces stared back, some eager to help, others visibly shaken by their sudden awakening. Ethan cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. "All right, team," he began, his voice steady but firm. "We've got a lot to figure out. First, let's take stock of our situation." He gestured toward Lieutenant Laura Bennett, who stepped forward holding a tablet displaying the ship's diagnostic reports. Her sharp green eyes scanned the group as she spoke. "As you all know, we've suffered significant damage during transit," Laura explained. "Power levels are low, life support is barely holding together, and navigation systems are completely offline. We're drifting somewhere far from Earth, and we don't have any contact with the Valons, or anyone else for that matter." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some crew members exchanged worried glances while others clenched their fists or shifted uncomfortably. The mention of the Valons seemed to strike a nerve, especially among those who had studied the mission briefings before entering cryosleep. Humanity's alliance with the alien race had been the cornerstone of their hope for survival against the Zorathian Empire. Now it felt like that hope had been ripped away. Private Jake Harper crossed his arms over his chest, his fiery red hair sticking out in messy spikes. "So what you're saying is, we're screwed?" he asked bluntly, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Several people shot him annoyed looks, but no one argued with the underlying truth of his words. Ethan ignored Harper's comment and continued addressing the group. "This isn't just about us anymore," he said, his voice growing more serious. "Earth sent us here because they believed we could make a difference. They trusted us to join forces with the Valons and fight back against the Zorathians. If we give up now, humanity loses its best chance at survival. But what if the Valons aren't even out there anymore?" Harper interrupted again, his voice rising slightly. "What if they abandoned us? Or worse, What if they turned? On us? His questions hung heavy in the air, sparking whispers among the crew. It was a possibility none of them wanted to consider, yet it couldn't be ignored. The Valens were supposed to be allies, but alliances could crumble under pressure. And 3 centuries was a long time, long enough for trust to erode and enemies to emerge. Laura stepped in, trying to steer the conversation back toward solutions. "We won't get anywhere by speculating," she said firmly. "Right now, we need to focus on repairing the ship and figuring out where we are. Once we stabilize our position, we can start looking for answers." Her practical approach seemed to soothe some of the tension in the room. Ethan nodded approvingly. "Lieutenant Bennett is right," he said. "Our priority is getting the Aurora Dawn operational again. Without functioning systems, we're sitting ducks. Let's split into teams and tackle the most urgent issues. First." He quickly assigned roles based on each person's expertise. Laura would lead a group to assess the engineering bay and restore power. Medical Officer Ryan Scott, a soft-spoken man with kind blue eyes, was tasked with setting up a triage area in case of injuries. Sergeant Olivia Grant, a no-nonsense woman with short brown hair and a commanding presence, took charge of security, ensuring the crew remained safe while they worked. Others were divided into smaller groups to inspect different sections of the ship for damage or anomalies. As the teams dispersed, Ethan stayed behind with Laura and Harper. He needed their input before finalizing the next steps. Harper leaned against a nearby console, scowling. "You really think this is going to work?" he asked skeptically. "Even if we fix the ship, we're still stuck in the middle of nowhere with no backup." "I don't know," Ethan admitted honestly. "But giving up isn't an option. We owe it to everyone back home and to the people who didn't make it to try." Harper opened his mouth to argue further, but Laura cut him off. "There. Might be something in the archives," she suggested. "Old logs, transmissions, anything that could tell us what happened to the Valens or why we woke up early." Ethan brightened at the idea. "Good thinking," he said. "Check the database for any records from before the system failures. See if there's anything useful." While Laura set to work accessing the ship's archives, Ethan turned his attention to Harper. Despite the private's abrasive attitude, Ethan recognized the value of having someone willing to question everything. Skepticism kept people grounded. It forced them to think critically and avoid blind optimism. Still, Harper's negativity threatened to undermine morale, and Ethan needed to address it. "Look," Ethan said quietly, lowering his voice so only Harper could hear. "I know you're frustrated, and you have every right to be. This isn't how things were supposed to go. But if we fall apart now, we'll never find a way forward. I need you focused, Harper. Can you do that?" Harper hesitated, his expression softening slightly. Finally, he gave a reluctant nod. "Yeah, okay," he muttered. "But don't expect me to sugarcoat things." "That's not what I'm asking," Ethan replied. "Just keep doing your job and leave the rest to me." With that settled, Ethan rejoined Laura, who had already begun sifting through the ship's archives. The data was fragmented, corrupted by years of neglect and the recent system failures. But amidst the broken files, she found something intriguing, a series of encrypted logs labeled Project Phoenix. "What's this?" Ethan asked, leaning over her shoulder to get a better look. "I'm not sure yet," Laura admitted. "It's locked behind multiple layers of encryption. Whoever created these logs didn't want just anyone reading them." Ethan frowned. "Do you think you can crack it?" Laura smirked confidently. "Give me some time. If anyone can break this code, it's me." As Laura dove deeper into the mystery of Project Phoenix, Ethan wandered through the ship, checking on the progress of the repair teams. In the engineering bay, sparks flew as technicians worked tirelessly to patch damaged circuits and reroute power lines. Laura's team moved with precision, their movements synchronized like a well-oiled machine. Despite the chaos, they were making headway, slowly but surely. Meanwhile, Sergeant Olivia Grant led her security detail through the corridors, scanning for potential threats. Though the ship appeared empty save for the crew, the eerie silence gnawed at everyone's nerves. Every creak of metal or flicker of light sent shivers down their spines. Grant maintained a watchful eye, her hand resting on the hilt of her sidearm just in case. Back in the main chamber, Medical Officer Ryan Scott had transformed a corner of the room into a makeshift infirmary. Beds made of repurposed crates and blankets lined the walls, stocked with basic medical supplies salvaged from storage compartments. Though no major injuries had surfaced yet, Scott prepared for the worst, knowing accidents were inevitable in such unstable conditions. By the end of the day, the crew had made modest progress. Power flowed more steadily through the ship, though life support remained precarious. The navigation array was still offline, leaving their location a mystery, and the encrypted logs of Project Phoenix continued to elude Laura's efforts. Despite the challenges, Ethan felt a flicker of hope. These people were resilient, resourceful, and determined to survive. Together, they had faced the initial shock of their predicament and started working toward solutions. Whatever lay ahead, Ethan knew they wouldn't face it alone. As he stood in the dimly lit corridor outside the main chamber, gazing at the stars visible through a cracked viewport, Ethan allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. The universe stretched endlessly before him, vast and indifferent. Yet within that cold expanse he saw something worth fighting for. Not just survival, but the chance to rebuild, to reconnect, to prove that humanity's spirit could endure even the harshest trials. With renewed resolve, Ethan returned to the main chamber, ready to guide his crew through whatever came next.